in and well, we have 11 participants, and 12 and counting. So yeah, they will join us when they join us. Okay. Uh, Welcome everyone. This is
Rajita, do you want to wait till the Facebook? Yeah, the Facebook Live started.
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Is it
Go ahead. Yeah.
okay? Welcome to the 137th CPR Urban Workshop. Actually, it's CPR-CSH. Okay. And today we have Gaurav Mittal, who wants to talk about Daggamaar Transport, everyday mobilities in Dehradun and Shillong. This is from his PhD research on the same area. He's looking at Daggamaar as a colloquial Hindustani term which is used in North India to describe ad hoc, arbitrary, and temporary nature of operation of transport vehicles. He will talk more about practices of the state and urban transport and how the state keeps a control over urban transport through these temporal structures. Uh, Gaurav Mittal has completed his PhD from NUS, National University of Singapore, and he's a political geographer, and with an interest in urban transport, obviously, and the role of governance in transport and urban spaces. He's currently on a visiting fellowship at Leibniz in Germany, and yeah, the floor is his now. Thanks, Gaurav.
Thanks, Aprajita. I'll share the screen. Just give me a moment. Yeah, I hope you can see the screen.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Good.
Good. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this workshop where I'm presenting from my PhD research. But before I start this presentation, let me give you a small trivia. It was about a decade ago that I was in New Delhi. I was practicing as an architect. I was working in a firm there that I got to know about this monthly urban workshop series at CPR-CSH. And out of curiosity, I started joining the workshops and I remember it still used to be on the last Tuesday of the month, 3:45 p.m. in CPR's conference room. It was through attending these workshops that my interest in urban policy and research actually took shape, and then I actually took a plunge in this field more. I did a master's from in urban policy and governance from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and then later on I did my PhD in geography from National University of Singapore. So I feel it's quite surreal for me to come back and present at the same platform, which actually gave shape to my career. So I really want to thank CPR-CSH for this workshop series and also to sustain it for more than a decade now. Saying this, in today's presentation, I'll be presenting from my PhD research. My PhD research looked into the relationship of city and transport in two small Indian cities of Dehradun and Shillong. And based on that, I'm presenting in today's presentation. But today's presentation will specifically be focused on the idea of formal, informal, legal, illegal, or techno-managerial languages, knowledge, and local politics of transport. And I place the state at the center of all these discussions. Without much further ado, let me start with presenting the case. Let me first tell you some background information about Dehradun and Shillong. Most of you may know Dehradun is capital of Uttarakhand. According to 2011 census, Dehradun city's population was about 580,000. The urban agglomeration population at the same time was about 700,000. But since then, Dehradun has gone through a delimitation in 2018, and it is estimated that the urban agglomeration now would have crossed the population of 1 million. So although it is a small city, you can see the scale of population in Dehradun. At the same time, Shillong is capital of Meghalaya, a small hill state in northeastern India. The population of Shillong, again, as per 2011 census, the city population was about 140,000. But the urban agglomeration population was more than 350,000. And it is because the city boundaries of Shillong have not changed since 1910. It was in 1910 that the municipality was delimited. And after that, the boundaries remain same. And that is why you see that a lot of population in Shillong is growing in the periphery of the city. The other interesting thing about Shillong is that the whole state of Meghalaya, it is covered under the sixth schedule. The sixth schedule of Indian Constitution gives some degree of self-governance to tribal societies in India. And that is why in Shillong, there is no elected municipal government. Rather than that, Shillong is divided into small localities. These localities are called shnongs in local language. And in each locality, there is a head of the shnong who is known as the Rangba Shnong. So these Rangba Shnongs are the selected people who are selected among the elderly males in the society in the shnong, and these Rangba Shnongs wield considerable power over the governance of their shnongs. So in this sense, the case of Shillong, and as I'll discuss further in this presentation, it's slightly different than the case of Dehradun. But before that, let me just introduce you to the transport in Dehradun. So if you go to Dehradun, you will see that there are many different modes of transport, and there's no such logic which you can find when you go for the first time in the city or something, that how these different modes of transport operate in relation to each other. So there are four primary modes of transport right now in the city, and which all four modes of transport provide de facto public transport services. So first of them are Vikrams. Vikrams are shared three-wheelers with a seating capacity of 6 to 7 passengers. There are about 800 Vikrams in the city. Then city also has city buses, which are about 25 to 30 seater mini buses. The number of buses is 300. City also has a few 7-seater micro vans. And in recent years, the city has also seen the influx of electric rickshaws. When I was in the city last time in June 2019, it was estimated that the city has approximately 2,000 to 3,000 electric rickshaws. Let me explain the origin and the nature of each of these transport in detail to you. So Vikrams are considered to be synonymous with the identity of Dehradun in many senses. So anybody who would have been to Dehradun may have seen these very interesting three-wheelers, which are slightly bigger than normal three-wheelers which operate in many other cities of India. So these vehicles were introduced in the city in the late 1970s, manufactured by Scooters India Limited. These vehicles were product of a joint venture between Indian government, Scooters India Limited as a limited company, and Italian company, and one Italian company. And the when these vehicles were manufactured, their brand name was Vikram. But in many of the cities where these vehicles can be found, they are just famous as the name from the name Vikram. The thing about Vikrams is that when they were introduced in Dehradun, they were licensed as contract carriage permit. And here, let me take a deviation and explain to you what a contract carriage permit is and how is it different than a stage carriage permit, because a lot of discussion on informality of transport in India hinges on these definitions, which come from the Motor Vehicles Act of India. So a contract carriage permit, according to Motor Vehicles Act of India, is given to a vehicle which can operate within defined limits. So there'll be defined boundaries, and the vehicle can operate within those boundaries. But the condition is that the contract carriage permit cannot operate between two predefined points, like say point A and point B. Or in if you are in Delhi, I assume many of you are, say Vasant Vihar to Manirka or something like that. So it cannot operate like this. It has to operate within the city. Plus, it cannot take retail passengers. It has to take passengers only by booking. So a contract carriage vehicle in bigger cities in India would be an auto rickshaw or a taxi. So those are the prime examples of contract carriage permits. At the same time, stage carriage permits are given to vehicles which are supposed to operate between two fixed points, should have a fixed stoppages in between those 2 points. Sometimes they may also have fixed frequencies, and they will always have a fixed fare, which they have to take from individual passengers. So they cannot operate in booking. They always have to operate between 2 points. The example of stage carriage vehicles in bigger cities would be all kind of city buses which operate in the cities. So as I said, that the contestations around formality and informality in India hinges on these definitions. And now I come back to the story of Vikram. Just one second. Story of Vikram. So the thing is that the Vikrams, when these were introduced in the city, they were given contract carriage permits. But ever since their introductions, Vikrams have been operating in the city as a stage carriage, as a de facto stage carriage. So they will always have these 2 points. Between these 2 points, they will operate. And it has been going on for more than 40 years now. So, and that is also the bone of contention about formality and informality of these vehicles, which I'll come to later. Let me go further and introduce the other vehicle which you find on Dehradun Road, which is city bus. So the city bus in Dehradun was introduced in the year 2000. It was also the year when Dehradun became capital of Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand became a state, and Dehradun became the capital of the state. So these city buses were introduced in the year 2000, and if we see the operation of these city buses is similar to Vikrams. These buses also operate from point to point. They are also owned by individuals. Yes. So the other thing about Vikrams is that all the Vikrams are owned by individuals. These are not owned by companies or a big conglomeration. So all the vehicles are owned by individuals. City buses are also owned by individuals. And these individuals operate these buses on predefined routes, which are defined in their stage carriage permit. So they operate like Vikrams, but their permit conditions are different. Their permit conditions are stage carriage permit, which are any city bus in anywhere in India. So the third type of vehicles in Dehradun are they are called Magics. Basically, these are 7-seater micro vans, but manufactured by Tata with the brand name of Magic, and it has become famous as Magic in the city. So These vehicles, the Magics, have a complicated permit system. So some of the Magics have contract carriage, some of the Magics have a stage carriage, but at the end, these vehicles also operate like Vikrams and city buses on specific routes are owned by individuals. So in operation, they are similar to Vikrams and city buses. The last of the primary vehicles in Dehradun are electric rickshaws. These e-rickshaws were introduced in the city sometime around 2015-16, and since then have seen a big um, a big number surge in the city. Uh, the thing about these electric rickshaws is that they do not need any kind of permit. They do not need a contract carriage or stage carriage permit. But what they have to do is that they have to register their vehicle with the RTO, Regional Transport Office, uh, and get a number plate. Once you get the number plate, that's it. Then these vehicles uh, can operate as they want to operate. And again, we can see that the electric rickshaws also operate as a de facto public transport. They have predefined routes in the cities where they operate and take passengers, individual passengers. But at the same time, these electric rickshaws also have far better flexibility, if I say, because if any electric rickshaw driver can take the customers by booking, they can take it easily. It doesn't mean that the Vikrams or City Buses or Magics do not take bookings, but generally the bookings are very lesser for those vehicles. But for electric rickshaws, they change quite often between taking passengers by booking and at the same time taking retail passengers. So these are the four different vehicles in Dehradun. Now let me tell you a bit about transport scenario in Shillong. So similar to Dehradun, transport in Shillong is also there are many vehicles which are competing with each other. There are about 20 to 30 city buses in the city. There are almost 6,000 shared taxis which operate in the city. Then Shillong, and here it is different than Dehradun. Shillong also has a considerable number of buses which were funded under the Janaram project. These buses, owing to their red color scheme, are known as Basaw in local language, in local Khasi language, in which bus means bus and saw means red. So it's red bus basically. Uh, in addition to Janaram buses, the Urban Development Department in Shillong has also procured quite a few seven-seater micro vans by the fundings which they got from 13th Finance Commission. These micro vans are locally known as Kali Sao, where Kali means car and Sao means red. So it's the red car. Let me give you a bit more detailed about each of these transports. So the city buses in Shillong have been operating since the Second World War in early 1940s. That is when, here let me tell you that Shillong is a very interesting city in the sense that the city was actually established by British in late 19th century. So the British actually bought the land from the local chieftain, local Khasi chieftain, and then established the city. And then they made the city summer capital of Bengal province, of which it was a part at that point of time. Later on, when the state of Assam was carved out of Shillong, carved out of Bengal, Shillong was made its capital. And it remained the capital of Assam until 1972, when Meghalaya was carved out of Assam, and Shillong was made capital of Meghalaya, and Assam's capital was shifted to Dispur. So as British established this city, they brought a lot of people from outside in the city. So if you see, most of the bureaucracy in the city was controlled by either SMEs or Bengali population. Most of the businesses when British were in India were controlled by Bengali businessmen. So it was in 1940s that a Bengali businessman started city bus service in the city by procuring three used trucks by British Army and converting them into the bus. Since then, city buses in Shillong have thrived. So after the independence, the owners of these buses came together. They created a syndicate, and that syndicate started governing public transport in the city. And the syndicate was at its strongest in 1970s when Meghalaya state was formed. But there was a huge anti-outsider sentiment in Meghalaya, which actually led a lot of riots also in the city throughout 1970s and 80s, and led to a lot of migrants leaving the city. So fleeing out of the city due to the fear of violence. Uh, so the Bengali businessmen, they kept their hold on city public transport until 1970s. But in 1970s, the policies of the state also changed. They stopped giving much permits to city buses. And rather than that, they introduced a new form of transport, which they called mini buses. These buses are similar to the city buses in Dehradun. But what happened is that the district transport office, which was supposed to give the permits to different vehicles, started giving a lot of minibus permits to the local population. So the Khasi population started owning the transport business, and slowly the city bus business started deteriorating. But the minibuses also survived in the city for about 1.5 to 2 decades. It was in the middle of 1990s that a lot of Maruti 800 cars made their way into the city, and these cars were licensed as a taxi in the city. So this is a contract carriage permit again, which is similar to the Vikrams in Dehradun. So these taxis were given contract carriage permits, and they were supposed to operate as any other taxi in any bigger cities in India. But what happened is that these taxis, they found operating as a stage carriage vehicle lucrative, and they started operating as stage carriage vehicles between different routes, between different localities in Shillong. Uh, and with that, it led to almost disappearance of mini buses from the city. The city buses still survive, and the reason I think that is, the city buses survive is that they have this strong syndicate among them, and they hold a big parcel of land at the heart of the city from where they extract rent, and that is how they are surviving right now. But again, at one time, there used to be about 300, 350 city buses in Shillong, and right now, there are only 20 to 30 city buses. The reign of shared taxis continued in the city in 2000s. And as you can see, there are almost 6,000 taxis in the city in Shillong right now. And most of these taxis were given permits in the 2000s. So if we see the ratio, we can see that 6,000 taxis for almost 300,000 population. So it's like one taxi for 50 people in the city, which is a huge density. As the number of taxis increased, there were a lot of problems in the city. A lot of people started complaining that the taxis do not go in on particular routes, in particular localities, and all that. With all these complaints, Genome buses in the city were introduced in the year 2010. At first, the city procured 120 buses, and then in the second phase of Generum, they procured 240 buses. So these Generum buses in the city are owned by Meghalaya Urban Development Authority, which is a parastatal, which is supposed to control the planning in the city and other urban areas of the state, but is also the owner of these buses. However, the Meghalaya Urban Development Authority do not have the expertise to operate these buses. So what they have done is that they have given the contract of operating these buses to a few local businessmen who have actually formed, and it's just for the namesake, they have formed self-help groups, and in the guise of self-help groups, they operate these vehicles. These businessmen then contract individual buses out to drivers and conductors who are supposed to pay daily rents for operation of these buses to these businessmen, and the businessmen pay these rents to the MUDA, Meghalaya Urban Development Authority. The interesting thing about these buses is that they have been given ML01 number plate. ML01 number plate in Meghalaya is reserved for government vehicles. And as MUDA is owner of these buses, they have been given ML01 number plate. What this number plate does is that it allows these vehicles not to seek any permit from district transport office. So these vehicles neither have stage carriage permit nor a contract carriage permit, but they are just considered government vehicles, and MUDA decides how, where, and when these vehicles will operate. Similarly, in 2012, the Urban Development Department of Meghalaya government procured about 300 seven-seater microvans. These microvans were funded under 13th Finance Commission Award to municipalities of the country. So if people are familiar with the Finance Commission, then they would know that since the 12th Finance Commission, the Finance Commission had started allocating a certain fund for the third tier of governments, which are municipalities and rural panchayats. As these vehicles were procured under 13th Finance Commission funds, the condition of the fund was such that only the municipality can procure these vehicles. So what the Urban Development Department did is that they made Shillong Municipal Board the owner of these vehicles. But the operation of these vehicles has been similar as the general buses. These vehicles are also operated by local businessmen in the guise of self-help groups. Vehicles are rented out to individual drivers. Drivers pay a daily rent to the businessman. The businessman pays a certain amount of money to Shillong Municipal Port. All right. So this is the story of not the story, but this is the condition of public transport in Dehradun and Shillong. So when we see this transport, we can see that there is a certain disorder to the transport. Most of these vehicles, they operate in competition with each other. They actually go to the same area in the city. They congregate in the same places. They try to take passengers. There is some skirmish also between different operators because they are going in same direction. They are vying for same passenger base, and this kind of aesthetic understanding has led a lot of reports, and we have seen a lot of comprehensive mobility plans and city development plans in last 1.5 decades since the National Urban Transport Policy was released. And in all these documents, in all these plan documents, you will see that the consultants describe these transport haphazard. They call them pseudo public transport at their best. Actually, they just call them this transport informal transport. And generally, the interventions is sought to be made in this in the informal kind of transports to formalize them and convert them into the formal. But when I went to the ground, I could see that this formal informal dichotomy, this does not hold much meaning for the transport operators or even passengers in both cities. They care very less about whether the vehicle is formal, informal, whether the mode of transport uh, operation is formal or informal. What I noticed is that a lot of transport operators in Dehradun uh, actually call uh, most of their competitors transport Daggamaar. So there is this very common thing that in Hindi they will keep on calling "Arey wo to Daggamari kar raha hai," which means that that person is indulging in Daggamari. This person, that person, almost every competitor is a Daggama. So then I tried to unearth that what does this term Daggamar mean? So I looked into the Hindi dictionaries, and there's no mention of what Dagamar in Hindi dictionaries. As there's no mention of it in Hindi dictionaries, there's no apparent translation in English language also. But what I discovered is that the word Dagamar is a spin-off of another Hindi word, which can be called Dhakamar. So dhaka means push and mar means an activity. So an activity of keep pushing. So that becomes dagamar in some sense. But let's see that how the word dagamar is used on ground in Dehradun. So what happened is that in one of my interviews with the president of Dehradun City Bus Association, he kept on calling a lot of vehicles Dagamar, a lot of things Dagamar. He kept on giving reference to Dagamar. So I just asked him that, okay, so what do you mean by Dagamar? To which he actually replied to me that Dagamar are the vehicles which are on contract carriage. So again, that reference to contract carriage and stage carriage here. Right? So these are the vehicles which have the permits of contract carriage, and they're supposed to carry from 3 to 6 passengers in their vehicles. And then he says that the contract carriage vehicles anywhere else in India, they operate by booking. So that means that they will pick up passengers from one place and drop it to their destination. But then he says that what has happened in Dehradun is that the vehicle owners of Vikrams, auto rickshaws, and Magics have colluded with the transport department officials and traffic police. And what they do by this collusion is that they, of course, one thing is that they encroach on the road, they make illegal parking stands, they take up the space of city buses. And the other thing they do is that they start operating between two particular points, which should not be supposed to be the mode of operation of these vehicles. So he says that these vehicles operate in violation of their permit condition. And as they operate in violation of their permit condition, he calls them Dagamar. So this is a very legalist way of looking at the practice of Dagamar. So if we go by the president of City Bus Association's definition, any vehicle which violates the original permit condition of operation is a Dagamar vehicle. But not everyone concurs with the president of City Bus Association. When I asked a Vikram owner in the city that a lot of city bus owners call Vikrams Dagamar, and what do you think of this tag, the Daggamaar tag on Vikrams. Uh, then he actually retorted. He almost shouted back on me, and he was like, "That Vikrams are not the only vehicle which are Daggamaar." He was like, "Even the city buses are Daggamaar." And he started questioning me. He started asking me that, "Tell me, if the city bus makes an unscheduled stop, will you not call it Daggamaar?" Or sometimes they will keep their buses standing for longer duration on busy bus stop, and then they will resort to rush driving to make up for the time to other stop. And he again asked me, "Will you not call that the Kamari? Uh, will you not say that they are actually acting in an illegal way in some sense?" Uh, and then he declared that not just the Vikrams, but all vehicles. And he said that not all vehicles in Dehradun, but all vehicles anywhere in India are Dagamar, because all vehicles in some way or other break the regulations under which they are supposed to operate. His view was concurred by a transport department official with whom I had a discussion, and it happened quite um, spontaneously, because I was going through the transport department's documents, and then I saw mention of word Dagamar in the official documents. So then I asked the officer that if this word is in official documents, then what does this word mean? Uh, and here and this one, I will read the whole code because I think it gives the essence of state's take on Dagamar. So the official told me Dagamar is a local word, not local to Dehradun, but local to this region. Yes, it is not an official word as it does not have a proper meaning, but we still use it sometimes in our reports and other records. We started using it because we get so many complaints in which people use this word. There is always someone or other who would complain that such and such vehicle driver or owner is indulging in the Gamari. Now the question is that how we understand the Gamari. It is not that the vehicle is operating illegally. The vehicle has a permit, it pays its taxes, the driver has the license. So we cannot call it illegal. When we write our reports, we cannot call these vehicles illegal, or else the senior officers will ask us how are we allowing the vehicles to operate illegally. So we use the word Dagamar. We use this word to show that there are complaints against the vehicle. So here you can see that there is this ambivalence in the transport department official towards the transport which operates in the city, because they do not want to call it illegal. But at the same time, they cannot control this to be completely legal. And hence, they resort to the word Dagamar, which places the vehicles somewhere in between legal and illegal. But this kind of response also creates this suspicion that these transport department officials are hands in gloves with the transport operators, and they want these vehicles to remain Dagamar in some sense, and through this they actually indulge in corruption. That is what the predominant understanding of city bus owners in Dehradun is. Uh, One of the city bus owners told me that he finds RTO to be a big party of this illegality. For him, Dagamar is illegal. For him, the operation of Vikrams is illegal. Okay, and he says that uh, only through this collusion that the vehicles have been able to make parking stands, encroaching on the road, and eat into city bus owners' business. So uh, that is the thing that he says that the transport department is corrupt, and as the transport department is corrupt, they actually promote the Gamari. But not everyone concurs with this analysis too. So when I actually asked Magic Driver, the seven-seater microvan driver in Dehradun, that what are his views on Daggamaari, and what does he think is the role of RTO officials in Daggamaari? Then he actually told me that Daggamaari happens. It is not because the RTO officials are. He also concurred that RTO officials are corrupt. That is true, but he said that it is not that through their corruption they promote Daggamaari, but he said that through their corruption they make sure that vehicles cannot operate in any other way but through a Daggamaar way. And here he takes this analogy of a meter in the sense of taximeter. So what he says that the RTO officials do not care about how the vehicles operate, where do they operate, or anything else, but they are just interested in money. So for him, as soon as the vehicle is given the permit, the owner is given the permit, the meter of the RTO officials start. So they start earning money from the vehicle owner. Whether the vehicle owner goes to showroom, takes out the vehicle or not, it is his responsibility. It does not matter to the transport official. What matters to them is that if they are going to delay in their in completing their registration, they will charge them more fines, more penalty fee. If the vehicle owners overload the vehicles, they will pay fine to government.
To
Yes,
wrap up soon. I hope you have your slides are just
I have
about
to wrap up.
yeah.
Okay, no, don't worry. It's 45 minutes, right? It's not even half an hour now. Or
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
is
no,
it?
we started at 3:45 and it's about 4:27 now.
Oh,
So
sorry. So I think I took a long time.
no
I'm
worries.
sorry. I will.
You take it and extra 5-7 minutes, whatever. But we
Sure,
need
sure,
some
sure,
time for question and answers. We do want to
sure.
hear the I probably want to
Yes.
go back between the cases as well once.
Yeah, yeah. So they are like the meter of the government just starts, and that is how they make sure that we indulge in the Daggamaari, because we have to pay to the government also, and at the same time we also have to earn the livelihood. So it is not that they promote the Daggamaari; it is that they create the conditions for the Daggamaari. So how to understand Daggamaar transport? Daggamaar describes an ad hoc, arbitrary, and temporary nature of transport operations in the city. So, so this is the nature which makes certain mode from being legal and formal. At the same time, it does not let them slip into illegality. So it places them between legal and illegal in some sense. And it is an ambiguous state in which the order of transport in Dehradun and Shillong is maintained. So what happens is that a lot of times we try to formalize this kind of transport, and Jairam Bus project is one of the big examples of this kind of push towards formalization of transport. But we can see, and it is for almost everyone to know that everyone knows that most of the times that these projects do not succeed in formalizing the transport. But what we can see is that there is this strong inertia towards repetition in Daggamaari, that all the vehicles, when they are introduced in the city, uh, become Daggamaar. So in this case, the general buses, which I described in earlier in Shillong, they are being operated by these individual operators and all. They do not have proper permits, so they also become Daggamaar. And with this, we can say that the transport does not operate through a simple rule of law, which we most of the times think that the transport operates within the rule of law. So if the transport does not operate within the rule of law, how to understand the transport? And here again, I put this quote from a retired transport official in Shillong, because I asked him that how do they allow shared taxis to operate in Shillong? Because these taxis are not legal in the legal sense. And he says that as far as government is concerned, there is nothing like shared taxi in Shillong. Shared taxi do not exist in Shillong. These are the contract carriage vehicles. These are supposed to be operating in contract carriage. But then he gives this reasoning that we cannot have a particular system for state of Meghalaya or Shillong. And these rules come from the Motor Vehicles Act, which is a central act. And if we have to change the rule, we have to go to Delhi, we have to go to the parliament. And who is going to go to parliament? Nobody is going to go to parliament. So what he calls these operations is the art of convenience, that how the operation of these vehicles is a product of art of convenience. Okay, so how do we understand the art of convenience? And here I'm going to skip the whole story of Vikrams, but I can give you some examples. So when the Vikrams were introduced in Dehradun, they were given contract carriage permit. But as I said, they have been operating as stage carriage. And it has been operating as stage carriage with the permission of RTO officials. They actually went ahead and they actually made sure that the Vikram associations were formed in the city, and these associations controlled the transport in the city. But in 1997, they had to freeze the number of Vikrams in the city because of a Supreme Court order which said that the Vikrams are polluting. But as soon as they froze the number of Vikrams, they started giving permits for city buses in 2000. And then these city buses later went to the court and called these Vikrams illegal. High Court actually declared that the Vikrams are illegal in 2012. But RTO officials, they could not stop the operation of Vikrams. They tried things, but because the cartels had become very strong with their support, they could not stop the operation of Vikrams. So what they did is that they tried changing the permit conditions of Vikrams. They started calling for applications that we will make Vikrams stage carriage vehicle. And for that, they tweak the regulations, they tweak the norms and all. So this is the art of convenience which the officer talks about, that you keep on fixing the transport in some way or other. If something has been called illegal, you fix it through putting some other norm, some other rule on top of it and trying to convert it into something else. What it does is that it creates a relationship of war between different transport operators in the city. These transport operators remain in a constant power struggle among themselves for the same passenger base. So that is why you will see all the vehicles congregating in the same areas. And this is, of course, the politics of survival. But from politics of survival, it becomes politics of dominance, because they want to dominate the other vehicle type in the city. And that is why they keep on filing these cases against different vehicles and all that. So what it does is that it creates an essence of sovereignty, which in which different transport operators can take different decisions. And here the understanding of sovereign becomes important. Justice S.N. Dwivedi of Allahabad High Court in 1967 wrote that the Constitution holds the ultimate power in India, and the Constitution places sovereignty in the people as a whole. But when we see in practice, where is the sovereignty? Where are people as a whole? But that is why I say that the other definition of sovereign becomes very important here, which comes from Carl Smith. He was a German philosopher. He says sovereign is he who decides on the exception. So we can see that law in Shillong and Dehradun functions through these exceptions, functions through suspension of its own norms from time to time. So when the law says something, you change the norm, or you suspend the norm, or you do not pay attention to the norm, like in the case of retired transport official in Shillong. And in the modern state, this exception becomes the rule, and it comes from Agamben. What the exception does is that it splits the force of law from the content of law. So the content of law may say that the Vikrams are illegal, but the force of law ensures that the Vikrams operate in the city. And Daggamaar in many ways signifies this split. Daggamaar sits on this split between force of law and content of law. So how to understand the decision making of the people or state or non-state actors? Daggamaar, its nature of transport is maintained through authoritative power of bureaucrats and shadow states. So bureaucrats, of course, all high-ranking and low-ranking bureaucrats, but also the shadow states, all the cartels which are created with the permission of bureaucrats. Uh, Judith Butler called these actors petty sovereign. These petty sovereigns are the people who manage contact between the state and the population. So they become the representative of the state. And how do they manage this contact? They manage it through an ad hoc governmentality, their propensity towards fixage, that keep fixing the things. If something is problematic, just fix it for the time being. Again, dhakka maar do, like keep pushing the things further. And this propensity of fixing things cannot be explained through a single rationality or law, but it has to be explained through the biopolitical nature of a state. That how to control the population, how to control the transport of the city. So what my thesis does, what my presentation does, is that it breaks this predominant understanding that in the contemporary world, societies function on a legal order. I have shown that the legal order does not exist in these cities. But how the transport is ordered is through making exception to the law. So the order is maintained in an exception. So what the exception does is that it constitutes heterogeneous and diverse set of orders placed together. Like there'll be a shared taxi also, there'll be a general bus also, there'll be a city bus also, there'll be magic also. All these vehicles will operate in the city. And it's very difficult to find a common locus between these vehicles. And it also places all these vehicles in a zone of indistinction between inside and outside the law. They are not completely outside the law, means they are not completely illegal, but at the same time, they are not completely illegal also. And because of this indistinction, the relationship of war between these different transport operators is nurtured. So what does this relationship of war does? I argue that it actually does two things. First, it makes the state arbitrator between different warring factions, between different transport operators. And by making it state arbitrator, it enables that the state rejects any responsibility towards particular disorder in the larger order. So if any report sees shared taxi as disorderly, the state can reject its responsibility towards shared taxi. That's what it does. The other thing what it does is that it also gives the state the ability to control the order. So it will always without the state will not directly take responsibilities of the outcomes of its intervention. I mean that can be seen in the case of general passage in Shillong. But at the same time, it gives the state the ability to control the wider order of transport, and I would say that wider of the city, order of the city. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sorry I took slightly longer, but I look forward to your questions.
I guess now we'll start off with the questions. There are some split over the chat and Q&A. Let me start with the one on the chat because that came first. Mukta, do we allow them to speak?
Yeah. I think we should just open the, we should just unmute the
Okay.
folks.
So I'm going to unmute Niyati. Oh, wait, I can't do it. Mukta, you are
I'll do
co-host.
it.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
Yeah, Niyati, you want to ask your question? You can you can speak now.
Yes. Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question was, what is the model of ownership in Dehradun buses? Like, is there a presence of state road transport corporation like there is in other places, or there is DTC in Delhi? So from what I've heard, that it's owned by individuals and then contractually given out to run. So just on the ownership of buses, city buses in Dehradun.
All right. So, Aprajita, shall I just take individual questions or?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, so the ownership of Dehradun city buses is with individuals. So what happened, and here I can get back to the history a bit, that Uttar Pradesh State Transport Corporation used to operate the city buses in city for quite long. But in early 1990s, they actually surrendered their permits by saying that the vehicles are not profitable. The operation of vehicles is not profitable. So about 8 to 10 years, there were no public buses in Dehradun. After that, in 2000, they issued the RTO issued the notification, and they called for individual owners for apply for permits on individual routes, specific routes. So they will open up the routes, and then they will ask owners to apply for those routes. And that is how it is owned by individuals. What happens is that the norms are such that one person cannot own more than one vehicle in Dehradun, more than one permit. So generally, we will see that there are some family things that within families there will be some 5-6 vehicles, but there will be not more than 5-6 vehicles within one person's um, uh, under one person's ownership. So that is the model they follow in Dehradun.
Okay.
I've opened the chat talking options for Gitanjali, for Dr. Mahalaya, and for Manish. So, Aprajita, up to you what order you want to go in.
Whoever asked the first question, yeah.
Anjali, I think.
Anjali, yeah. Anjali, go ahead.
Gitanjali, you had a question about SPVs, I think. Yeah? Do you want to ask yourself? Or should we read from the Q&A? Okay, Gitanjali's question essentially is about Shillong. Is there an SPV for the JNNURM buses in Shillong? She wants to know. Her connect is bad, so she wants you to answer it.
No, yes. I mean that was the condition of general bus funding anyway. So of course, an SPV, but there is some disturbance. I'm sorry, I don't know. Um, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Uh, um, so of course, the SPV was formed in Shillong. But that SPV is within Meghalaya Urban Development Authority. So when I went to check the office of, and they call it Shillong Public Transport Service, SPTS. These bus services are called Shillong Public Transport Service. So when I went to check the office of Shillong Public Transport Service, of course, there is no physical office. So within MODA, the whole operation of these buses is actually controlled by an accountant. So that accountant is the SPV for the operation of the buses. We can say it in that way. So although on papers, yes, SPV exists, there is a escrow account where all the money goes, all those things happen. But in reality, there is no SPV, but there is one person who is actually the contact point for all the owners of JNNURM buses. Yeah.
Okay. Manish, do you want to go next? We can unmute you.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So for this, first of all, Gaurav, this was an excellent talk. I want to ask you two things. First, a little bit about why or how you chose these two cities, Shillong and Dehradun in particular, for this research. Like if there was any thought process that went into picking these cities, because they're also very interesting cities. And secondly, is what you call the inertia against formalization function of how big the city is. So in the sense, as the city gets larger, would you say that these smaller, more Daggamaar operations become less scalable, and therefore they become less visible would you say they become less visible in larger cities? So I'm saying, if you contrast, for instance, Shillong and Guwahati, right? Like
Mhm.
even between these two cities, you're able to see a certain difference in the nature of public transit operations. And obviously, as you
Right.
go large, as you go like higher, the scale changes. So,
Mhm.
just your thoughts on that.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Why I choose Shillong and Dehradun? Dehradun was the city where I just searched for my master's. So I already had some understanding of Dehradun before I started my PhD. And at that time, I chose Dehradun because Dehradun is also the city uh, where I have been going since my childhood. I grew up in a small town called Uttarkashi in Uttarakhand. So Dehradun was the gateway to Uttarkashi. Uh, so I used to go to Dehradun a lot. I used to see the operation of these Vikrams a lot. So that is how when I had to choose a city for my master's research, I chose Dehradun. And I thought that it may be slightly more convenient also, which I think most of the researchers think when they are going for research. So Dehradun, of course, because of my childhood connections with the city. At the same time, Shillong was the city when I decided that I want to do a comparative study for my PhD and I want to compare two cities. I started looking for different cities, and I had this thing that I wanted to work in small cities only. So I looked into the small cities which were under JNRM, uh, had some sort of public transport because it was important for me that because the research was on transport. And then I visited quite a few cities myself. I went to Shimla, I went to Jammu. Uh, yeah, the other thing is that yes, I went to all the hill states. I don't know, I mean, why, but uh, I think it's mostly because I think that the hill states are always the lesser player when it comes to urban infrastructure. So I went to hill cities in North India, and then I went to cities in Northeast India. I went to Kohima, I went to Aizawl, I went to Guwahati, I went to Shillong. And uh, Shillong's case, I found it very interesting because it was the only city which financed transport through 13 Finance Commission funding. I have not seen this kind of financing of transport in any other city. Uh, so I found it quite interesting, and I could see that how uh, uh, complex the Shillong's transport is because of existence of these different kind of vehicles. That is why I took Shillong. Plus, the other thing which made me interested in these two cities is that Dehradun is a city which was just another city in UP until 2000. Like nobody would remember Dehradun until 2000, other than that it was a retirement town or something. But suddenly it became capital of Uttarakhand, and suddenly you can see a lot of growth in Dehradun. Like in last 20 years, the population of the city may have tripled. So that kind of growth in Dehradun. At the same time, Shillong was a very important city in British India. It was the capital of the whole state of Assam. So a lot of control was in the city. The state control was in the city. But when it became capital of a small hill state of Uttarakhand, there is some kind of reign of the state which happened at least the central state which happened in the city, and it gave power to the local people a bit more. So that was also the reason that I chose these two cities. Um, Second thing, that you talk about this inertia against formalization in the small cities. I would say that this is something which I find common even in big cities. I mean, of course, at a lesser scale. What happens is that the state can become more brutal in bigger cities, and it can assert its control in a more dominant way. But at the same time, if we look at the history of public transport in bigger cities, the state has always been the provider of public transport. I mean, Best has been providing public transport in Bombay even before the Indian state was formed. Same thing about DTC. DTC has been providing public transport services in Delhi for long. But at the same time, there are these inertias about on towards the Daggamaari, towards the informality in these big cities too. Like how will you understand Grameen Seva in Delhi, or how will you understand the operation of shared autos on many routes in Mumbai, or in many other cities in India? So there is certainly this inertia towards informality, inertia towards Daggamaari in big cities. But this inertia is not that visible because the more formal transport is more visible in these cities. Uh, at the same time, yes, I mean, even the proliferation of electric rickshaws everywhere. I mean, it's a big example of Daggamaari again. Yeah, I hope I have answered your
Gaurav,
question.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting you say this. I think Manish is also coming from, and I'd like to invite Dr. Mahalaya to intervene after this. But Manish, Dr. Mahalaya, and we were all involved in a study of auto rickshaws in Kolkata, and I think
Kolkata,
a lot
yeah.
of our insights are coming from there, where how unions were actually involved in the negotiation between the state. Basically all the complex interactions and the political economy of the same situation where a contract carriage is actually converted informally into a stage carriage with formalized routes and fare fixing and all of that done, but all of it done through unions and through sort of alternate informal means. So that's the insight from which we are also hearing what you're saying, and it's fascinating that it's happening all over the country, and in every city it's probably manifesting in slightly different ways because of local politics and identity politics. And Shillong was fascinating, especially historically, looking at how different ethnic groups lay claim to these kind of this thing. It also intersects with other work that CPR does on small towns, where we are seeing that as urbanization gets dispersed in India, transport actually becomes a very big employer. Especially in small town India, informal transport becomes a very big employer. So in fact, even in Kolkata, a lot of this auto rickshaw business started as an employment scheme, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Mahalaya, I'd like you to come in. I'm sure you had other things to say, but I just remembered that we were talking about how many of these things actually start as employment schemes and loans for young men to buy auto rickshaws or to buy Vikrams, and then they have to also then insert themselves into the permit landscape in the transportation regulation landscape. It's not just about buying the vehicle, it's also about figuring out how to operate it legally. So Dr. Mahalaya, over to you. You just have to unmute yourself. I'll do it. One second.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Oh, first, let me thank Gaurav for an excellent presentation, and thanks for Mukta for bringing back the memories of walking on auto rickshaws in Kolkata. Frankly speaking, I don't have any idea about transportation in Dehradun, but recently I had a chance to examine a doctoral thesis on transport in Shillong. So I would like to bring in a different point, that when you are talking about the political geography, as you have said, and the Daggamaar thing, you have talked about the sovereignty, the state, and the so-called vehicle operators, the agents, the operators. But I would, as an economist, I would like to look into the whole demand-supply thing. That is the demand for, as Mukta has rightly said, that with the lack of public transport, even with JNRM and anything else, public transport is shrinking in all Indian cities, big or small, and that part is taken up by this type of vehicles, this Vikram, this Magic, this and whatever name you can call them. Mukta would remember that we tried her to find out that whether any government notification in Kolkata by which the contract carriage of these auto rickshaws were being transformed to state carriage. We did not find any. But we did find that RTO negotiating with the unions about fixing the fares and sometimes giving orders on the number of passengers they can carry and anything else. But if you go, Calcutta is more organized in that sense. But if you go to any smaller town, I am talking about my experience in West Bengal. If you go to Bolpur, if you go to Shantiniketan, a very hot tourist spot, even in a so-called backward small city like Ranaghat, you will find that all these vehicle operators are highly unionized, a sort of syndicate or anything else you can call them by name. And there comes the so-called demand part, the consumer demand part. If the government takes any step to ban all these vehicles, there will be huge hue and cry from the users, from the passengers, because there is no other alternative. So when you are talking about this Dagmar type of thing, that is the sovereignty of these operators against the so-called state regulations by the state or anything else, one had to bring in the consumer part, the passenger part, without bringing in the demand for the passengers, and which is definitely so-called reflected in their behavior, in their others. In Kolkata, we have seen, Mukta would remember, that the passengers would not bother whether the route is legal or not. They just want the auto to be there at the stand because they want to use it. So that part is also very important. If you can bring in that part, I am saying, as I have said, that just recently I examined the thesis on transportation in Shillong, and in that this issue has come up in a big way. Big way, that is the informal transport operators, their unionization, the way they fix their routes and their fares, etc., has come in a big way in that thesis. With that experience, I would like to ask you that if you want to expand your work on this, or if you want to publish something, please bring in the other part, that the passengers, the demand part, and because I think the operators are powerful because the passengers are behind them. This is just what I had to say.
Gaurav?
Thanks, Dr. Chatterjee. Yeah. Shall I just, yeah. Yes, you are absolutely right. I mean, you're right on point that the users form a big party to the decisions which are made. I mean, and here I'll give you the example of Dehradun. In 2014, when High Court actually passed the judgment, 2012 they passed the judgment that Vikrams are illegal. And 2014, the RTO officials actually acted on that, and they started asking Vikrams to operate on edge contact carriage. So it was the public. It was the Vikrams were able to mobilize the public, and through that they created the pressure on RTO officials to let them operate. So you are absolutely right that the public becomes very important. The demand becomes very important. And that is where I would say that these people derive their sovereignty because of this kind of support. So, it is not the sovereign as in the pre-modern sense as a body of king, but it is the sovereign which actually derives the powers through the functions which it does basically. So that is there. And you talked about Shillong, and I would actually point out that Shillong's case is more peculiar because you can see a different kind of sovereignty being practiced in Shillong, which we do not find in any other place. And this is the sovereignty of Rangbashnongs, which I introduced earlier. These are the headmen, the local headmen of locality. So when you go, you can. Transport cartels are powerful anywhere in India. So almost all the cartels are powerful. They create the associations and all, and they regulate the entry exit of the vehicles on particular routes and all that. But the thing is that in Shillong, a lot of transport cartels, a lot of shared taxi cartels derive their powers through this sovereign figure of Rangbashnong, which is actually a residue of past sovereign. So Rangba Shillong has been the sovereign in Khasi tradition for centuries. So they are the people who are well respected in the localities, and they are the people who govern a lot of things, so who control a lot of things. And that is what happened, that when Dehradun buses were introduced in Shillong, there are certain localities where these buses cannot go. They are not allowed to enter because Rangba Shillong said that you cannot enter in my Shillong. I interviewed the chief secretary of urban development department who actually introduced this passage and then retired. He was retired when I interviewed him. He actually told me that he asked the bus operators to file cases against these Rangba Shillongs, that why are they not letting them operate the buses in the Shillong. And the operators just said that they cannot disrespect these Rangba Shillongs. So a lot of power, especially in Shillong, comes from these Rangba Shillongs. And what they do is that they give these powers to their local taxi drivers. So you will see that the taxi drivers who can go to that locality has to be from that locality. So it is that kind of control which they assert, and that kind of sovereignty which they come from. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your answers. I just had a quick question about the precarity and safety, as in the technology itself is precarious and it exists in this economy which is semi-permanent, permanent, we don't know. So I was going to push you more towards, like, how do you theorize that kind of precarity? And the other word is safety. Did you find, or are you thinking about these as in the Daggamaar as some sort of a like unsafe, not in the way of like, oh, I'll fall out, but more in terms of gender dimensions of when can I travel, how can I travel as a woman, and as someone who is maybe not very familiar with the city. So yeah, these are the two questions I thought I'll ask you.
Okay. Yeah. So precarity, of course, yes. I mean, the thing is that the whole focus of the state, whole drive of the state in keeping things Daggamaar. So what the state does in this? The state just temporarily fix things. So they keep on fixing things. It's like in Hindi we call it chippy marna, right? That you keep on putting sellotape on the things and all that. You keep on fixing it. So with that, what happens is that, of course, the whole solution is temporary. And the whole solution is precarious. And here I would say that the situation of the owners, the drivers, and the passengers, all of their situations are precarious. So it is not just that the passengers are precarious and the owners are actually making a lot of money or something like that. It's not that. They also have this thing. So the thing is that this temporariness, the way state operates, the Daggamaar nature of the state makes this temporariness permanent. So the precarity is that precarity is the permanently temporary state of operation of these vehicles. So they cannot come out of this temporary nature because of their Daggamaar nature, but they also remain permanent. I mean, in this, I like to give this analogy of a vehicle which needs jump start. So I think of Daggamaar as a vehicle which needs jump start. So when a vehicle needs jump start, what happens? That everybody has to push the vehicle, right? The driver will sit and everybody else will push the vehicle, and everybody will push. At one point of time, the vehicle will start with a jerk. And then the vehicle starts, everybody sits in the vehicle, and then they take the journey. But within this whole journey, they know that this vehicle can break down at any point of time. And once the vehicle breaks down, their journey remains precarious because they are always thinking that it may break down and all that. But at the same time, the Daggamaar nature, what it does is that it also gives them the hope that once the vehicle breaks down, we can restart the vehicle with the help of same actors. So once the Vikram is declared illegal or something, the operation of Vikrams can continue with the help of same actors, the RTO officials, the passengers, the cartel leaders and all. They will come together and then they will again push Vikram. And then the Vikram will again start agile. So that is how the precarity is lived. So, and this precarity is cyclical, it just continues. The other thing, safety. Uh, I exclusively did not focus on safety in my research, but I can tell you what I observed. And I think it can be because of cultural differences also. I, 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 I have seen that the women in Shillong feel much more safe in taking all these precarious modes of transport also. Like in Shillong, they put 4 passengers at the backside of taxi, like back seat, and it's Maruti 800. So it's like really closed packing. But most of the women find it quite safe to travel in this mode. I think it is also because most of the taxi drivers are from the locality. They know each other, and that is where the Rangbashlong's control also comes in the picture. That uh, because Rangbashlongs make sure that only the local drivers operate the taxi in localities and all, so people are familiar with each other, and that is why I think the women feel more safe to sit in these vehicles and all. Dehradun, on the other hand, is opposite. I mean, Dehradun is an extension of Delhi. The same kind of problems which women face in Delhi, uh, they will face in Dehradun also. Most of the vehicles stop operating around 8 p.m., 9 p.m. So there are no vehicles after that. So after the dark, you have to rely on your family members. Or nowadays, Ola is there. So women have started booking Ola. But again, I mean, it is not a sustainable solution. It is for just that upwardly mobile middle class women who can book these kind of vehicles. For other vehicles, they have to travel sometime. They will look for people with whom they can travel. They will look for the things for their safety themselves. So yeah, in that sense, it is just an extension of Delhi.
Okay, thank you. In fact,
Yeah.
that leads to the last question here. I mean, assuming there are no other questions, how are ride-hailing services like Ola and Uber changing the transport landscape in these cities?
Huh. Okay. So Shillong does not have Ola or Uber yet, and I think it is not going to have Ola and Uber anytime soon also, because the local cartel is very strong. Even the intercity Ubers and Olas which go to Shillong from Guwahati have to stop at a particular place, and they cannot go beyond that particular point. So in some sense, they are not allowed entry into the city. So they have the strong cartelization and all, through which they are actually keeping their business safe. Uh, However, Shillong has shared bike ride, Rapido. But Rapido was introduced in the city after I finished my fieldwork. So after June 2019, I I keep on talking to my participants and other friends and all. So some people are of course taking on Rapido because the city has huge transport problem, like uh, traffic jams and all, narrow roads, uh, etc. So a lot of people prefer to take two-wheelers because two-wheelers are faster and they're taking it. But then again, this is a particular segment of the society which can actually take individualized rides to places. Dehradun has Ola for quite a few years now, I think 4 or 5 years. Uh, but again, Ola caters to a very different segment of society. So people who would be taking Vikrams or city buses for their daily commute will not be relying on Ola, because the transport in Ola will be at least 10 times more costly than transport in Vikrams and city buses. So I cannot see much impact of these services on the city's public transport yet, but I cannot say about future. Yeah.
Um, okay. Oh, we have one more question from Partha. Partha, do you want to just ask the question? Mukta, can we unmute him? Uh, wait.
Done. Partho, floor is yours.
He's on mute, I think. Oh,
Thank you.
now.
Gaurav, I'm sorry, my net just came back and I wasn't sure whether you have looked at this issue. I was just wondering, both Dehradun and Shillong, do you find that the operators want a degree of formalization? And if so, what kind of formalization do they want, or do they prefer remaining in their current state? And we can, you can elaborate. If you think that is the case, then you could tell us why you think they prefer remaining in the current state. And in these two cities, in terms of looking at, for example, and what you just mentioned about Shillong as the union being very strong, in Johannesburg, for example, the maxi taxis are have a, I don't know whether it's deserved or not, quite a reputation for using force and violence to keep people away from serving those kinds of routes, not having buses, structures, etc. Did you find any of that? And I don't see too much of that in India. And do you have any sense of why that might be the case? Thank you.
Thanks, Partho. To your first question, do operators want some formalization? As I stated in my research, they are least bothered about this formal informal dichotomy. If you go talk to them, nobody will talk about formal informal. They're like, what is this? We don't know. We just know this thing that these are our vehicles. We provide public good, public services through these vehicles. But at the same time, these are the vehicles through which we earn our livelihood. So it is, of course, a private enterprise, but it is for public good. So these are these vehicles for them. So they're not bothered about formalization as such. But what they want is recognition by the state of their existence. So especially in the shared taxi drivers in Shillong, although there are 6,000 shared taxi drivers, which is a huge number, they want this recognition that they exist in the city and they provide a public transport services in the city. So when I told them that the comprehensive mobility plan of the city called them pseudo public transport because they are not contract carriage. They actually asked that they want to talk to the transport minister and find a solution for that we are not pseudo public transport, we are the de facto public transport or something. But at the same time, the drive for formalization is not from within. And here I will jump to the case of Dehradun. So of course, the High Court declared the operation of Vikrams illegal in 2012. And Vikram operators were seeing it coming. So in 2011, the Vikram Association actually filed an application with the RTO, Regional Transport Office, that please look into the matter of converting us from contract carriage to stage carriage. So in some sense, formalize, right? But nobody heard them and all. When I went to the field, it was in 2017 for the first time when I went to the field. Then I heard that the RTO actually issued a notification that they want to convert Vikrams from contract carriage to stage carriage. So what they did is that there is this rule in Motor Vehicles Act that the stage carriage permit has to have more than 6 passengers. And all the Vikrams were issued the permits for 6 passengers. So first thing they did was that they said that all new Vikrams will be issued the permits for 7 passengers. And this they did was again through fixing, talking to the local vehicle dealer, Vikram dealer, and asked him that why don't you place a seat next to the driver, and we'll count it as a seat. So 6 seats at the back and 1 seat in the front, so it becomes 7 seats. And then then they said that any vehicle which has a 7 seat, we will give them stage carriage permit. Out of 794 Vikrams, not even 80 Vikrams applied for that. Although they asked that the association asked that they want a stage carriage permit, but not even 80 Vikrams applied for that. And when I asked them, people who didn't apply, that why didn't you apply? They were very happy. They were like, the current condition keeps our operation more flexible. So if we convert to stage carriage, we cannot change the routes. If we want to change the routes, we'll have to go on a particular route only. The other thing is that in tourist seasons, a lot of these people go to tourist places. They take their vehicles in booking and they will go to tourist places. Sometimes they act as a ambulance. They will take people to hospital. Sometimes they act as a school bus. Like in the mornings, they will take children to school. And he was like that we will lose all this flexibility if we convert our permit. And that is why they were not, most of them were not interested in converting the permits, but keep on working in the status quo. Second thing about force and violence. Of course, African public transport market is very violent. And it's not just South Africa, it's everywhere in Africa. I mean, we can see a lot of bloodbath, a lot of gang wars happening in Africa. I do not have a solid answer to your question that why doesn't it exist in India, but I have a hunch. And it is that in India, the control of state is much more stronger on transport. So although we think that this is informal transport, this is disorderly, and as I argued, that the disorder actually helps the state to control the transport in a with a more much better iron fist. So we can always see that state is involved in every kind of decision making. If the cartels are being made among the Vikram owners or the taxi owners, state is in the knowledge of those cartels. State keeps the contact with the cartel leader. So in that sense, state remains in firm control of the transport. And as state remains in firm control of the transport, they also make sure that even if the operators are in a relationship of war, that relationship of war does not go out of hand. So as soon as someone becomes more violent, more aggressive, they rein the person down by, again, quoting their Daggamaar status. Like if the city bus union in the Dehradun keep on agitating against the Vikrams, they will pull them. They will tell them that how they are very crazy things, like how the bus is supposed to have a strip around around it, a blue color strip. So once I saw in one of the notification how the width of the strip is not 3 centimeter but 2.8 centimeter or something like that. So they will bring in all these different kind of regulations to rein them in. That is how they control the violence, I would say.
One final thing, Gaurav, if I can quickly, and I can just answer this yes or no in some sense. Have you spoken about the finance issue during the talk? Then I'll just catch up on the video. That's not a problem.
Right. Okay. No, not explicitly, but I could see that how the political economy of the operation works, how the contracts are, the informal contracts are made, how the different drivers have to pay to the owners, and the owners then have to pay to certain people, how the cartels actually collect money among them, through which they pay the traffic police, the RTO officials to let them operate, and how these kind of bribes give these cartels and the owners power over the RTO officials and traffic police also. That how, I mean, if a vehicle is in an accident, uh, they're able to get that vehicle out of the police station very fast. They are able to settle these matters very fast. So these kind of things, not explicitly that how the vehicles are financed. I know that a lot of shared taxi, and now there's not much uh, new permits in these vehicles. In 1990s, they were financed through these liberal government schemes of bank loans and all. A lot of the schemes, especially in Shillong, were given to surrendered militants. So they were given preferences to for the permits. Same time in Dehradun, you will see all these different schemes for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, or other backward castes, through which they were given permits, and the finance came through the banks. So these kind of things, but not explicitly that I looked into this matter.
So that's fascinating, because you're saying that
Yeah.
despite the informal part of the business,
Mhm.
many of these vehicles are formally financed, are financed through formal financial institutions like banks. I mean,
Mostly,
hmm.
mostly, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's been, I'm sorry I missed your talk, but thank you so much.
No worries, Partha. Thanks.
Okay, I don't think there are any more questions. So we are going to close this session today. Thank you so much, Gaurav, and hope we didn't rush you through the last part of the presentation.
No, I'm sorry. I miscalculated the time. I think I spoke more than I should have
So convinced.
earlier.
I
But
was like, yeah, sure, yeah, he has more time. Anyway, thank you so much, and hope
thank you.
everyone is taking something away from this talk. If nothing
Yes.
else, just Daggamaar. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Aprajita and Mukta and everyone else.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye
Bye.
bye.